Thank you for joining me again for the Author Stories podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. This is author Hank Garner, and with me this week is a very special guest, Michael Patrick Hicks, the author of Convergence and Emergence. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Thank you, Hank.
Thank you for coming. And as we jump into the show, I usually start by asking all of my guests to just give us a little background about you and tell us how you became a writer. Was there a specific thing that happened to you, or has this been a lifelong dream? What is it that has kind of been the catalyst for you to jump out there and share your stories with the world?
Well, writing was something that I've really kind of always done. The big impetus behind it came in high school. I think in senior year, I had a creative writing course, and it just took off from there. I really finally realized how much I loved creative writing. I'd always been good at essays and things of that nature. So once that creative outlet opened up and I could really dive in and explore all these themes and characters that they hammer into you in the literature courses, to be able to actually sit down and focus and create original fiction, it never looked back after that. It was just something that struck me and always stuck with me after that. I did do some freelance journalism, so I was writing other people's stories for a good 2 or 3 years when I finally decided that I need to get back into writing my own stories and going back to what I was doing many years ago now, back in high school, and diving back into the creative aspect. When I wrote Convergence back in 2013, I wasn't sure that I had anything, but kind of on a whim, I had come across the Amazon Breakthrough Novel Award for that year and decided I didn't have anything to lose, and I figured I would get rejected straight off the bat. And I ended up surviving up through the quarterfinals and walked away with a great review from Publishers Weekly. The Amazon editors and their Vine readers liked what I had. So I thought, well, maybe I do have something here, and decided to shop it around and eventually self-publish it. So it finally released in 2014, last February, and then just this past May of this year, I released the sequel, Emergence.
Excellent. When you wrote that novel and decided to submit it to the Amazon competition, did you have any? Well, first off, how long did you work on that novel before you submitted it? Was this something that you had been working on for a while, or and kind of where did the idea for it come from?
Well, I'm going to tackle that in kind of reverse order.
I'm sorry. That was a shotgun question.
Oh, no, that's fine. I guess you could say that I have been working on it for quite a while in various forms and stages. The original idea came to me back in 1999 or 2000 when I had seen an article on BBC News about these research scientists at University of California, Berkeley, had then for the first time attached basically a video feed to the optic nerve of a cat's eye. And they were able to see what the cat was seeing through the cat's eyes on a television set.
Wow.
So I thought, well, okay, we're getting close. It's going to be a matter of time before we're recording our memories and maybe being able to see through the eyes of another person directly. And I had this great big, I guess you could say, overarching story for it. It was going to be this massive intergalactic space opera sort of thing, and that didn't work at all. The idea had stayed with me for the past, well, at that point, 13 years, when I finally decided to dive back into that story. So it stuck with me for quite a long while, and just following things from DARPA, seeing the stuff they're up with. They're running what's called a Remind project to help wounded veterans with brain damage restore some of their cognitive functions and memory capabilities and dealing with memory loss from injuries. So it seemed like the right time to pursue that story. And I've lost track now of your series of questions.
No, no, that's so then you have the idea for this book and you kind of let it percolate and ruminate. At what point did you like seriously jump in and start writing the book and
Right.
how long did it take you to finish it?
I believe it was in August of 2012, July or August, summer of 2012 at any rate, that I finally sat down and started writing it with the intent that it would be a short story to lead into a more epic novel. And the more I kept writing it, the more it stayed with me and just kept growing naturally until it became a novel in its own right. And I probably wrote it for 5 or 6 months, at least up and through the tail end of 2012, because the Amazon Breakthrough 2013 started that January. So I had, what was essentially a first draft ready in time for that Amazon Breakthrough novel, and I did a pretty rapid polish of it, a lot of self-editing in a very brief amount of time, and submitted it to Amazon. And then, like I said, it was just a first draft. I wasn't expecting to make past the first tier. There were about 10,000 submissions, so I was in one of the last, I want to say the last 5 for the science fiction category when it all ended. So, but made it through quite a bit of competition.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you make it through the quarterfinals. You're getting a lot of really great feedback, and then you decide, okay, well it's time to put this out to the rest of the world,
Mm-hmm.
and you decided to self-publish. What was some of that decision making like for you?
Well, a lot of it was following a lot of the other self-published authors that have kind of paved the way. Reading blogs from Hugh Howey, Joe Conrath, seeing Chuck Wendig dabbling with hybrid author. He was self-publishing and pursuing traditional path as well. Um, and my first impulse was to actually try and get a traditional contract. Um, and after just spending a lot of time waiting and waiting and waiting, it was getting around to the idea that this is just money sitting in the drawer while I'm waiting for New York agents to call me back and never hearing anything from them. So I decided, what, I'm just going to try and put this out there on my own. I know I've got something. It didn't win, so maybe it needs a little bit more polishing. And I ended up going through Red Adept and getting a professional editing job on it and released it out into the wild. I was finally comfortable with where it was at and thinking it was a pretty solid work in its own right and something I could be proud of.
Yeah.
And self-publishing seemed like the way to go.
And I think a lot of people have weighed those pros and cons um, uh, of letting something kind of make its way around the world and from agents and editors and I like what you said that it was that it's just money sitting in the drawer that could be um, the book could be put to work, so to speak, where instead of just bouncing around the world looking for someone who might realize what a good many of readers had already realized was something that connected with them.
Oh yeah, completely. I wrote it to be read, not to
Right. That's
not
right.
to sit around for years waiting on New York and Hollywood to knock on the door to finally realize there was gold here.
Right. It's a pretty crazy time that we live in that a writer can actually say that. Well, I wrote it to be read, and I actually have the power to put this in front of people today.
Oh yeah.
That's something that writers have never been able to say before. It's really a golden age for writers.
Oh, it definitely is. Self-publishing has changed the dynamic entirely. Particularly, I mean, if you're looking at the day and age now, there are not a lot of publishing houses that are going to give you an advance, let
Right.
alone a serious advance.
Right.
They're
Or
not going to be,
support for that matter.
Right, exactly. If I was going to a publishing house, odds are I wouldn't get any marketing, I wouldn't get any advance. I would be in the exact same spot that I am doing it myself, but at least doing it on my own, I'm able to have more income directly instead of waiting for it to trickle through whatever book publisher's accounting system, the very hidden universe of big publishing accounting.
Right, right.
um, but yeah, just being able to put it out there and market it and do it all on my own, it wasn't a huge toss up one way or the other. I think
Right.
that if I would have gotten any kind of feedback from a publishing house or an agent who was interested in it, I might have dealt with it and see where that path led, and maybe still would have wound up doing the indie publishing route just because it might have been the more satisfactory route to go through.
Yeah. Where did emergence come from? Did you know when you wrote Convergence that there was a natural sequel? Did you plan a series of books when you wrote it, or did you just kind of leave room at the end to continue that story?
It kind of came out naturally on its own. Like I said, when I started Convergence, I was expecting it to be a short story, and it was going to be a lead in, kind of a tease for a whole other separate book that just dealt with that kind of memory technology, the DRMR technology and convergence for memory recording. So when I wrote Convergence, I thought that there was a pretty solid ending to it. It was open enough that I could come back to if I wanted to. But Emergence kind of grew out on its own. It wasn't something that I had planned or necessarily foreseen when I was writing Convergence, but it was a very natural sequel to write, something that grew on a lot of themes and the plot elements of the first book to become a little bit different in its own right, but still be a part of that continuity. As far as the series, I don't know. I am not by nature a series writer. I always like, even if it's part of a series, to be a good standalone work that can be enjoyed in its own right. So when Convergence ended, I wasn't planning on Emergence. When Emergence ended, I only have the faintest glimmer for a third book, but I'm not quite ready to dive into that one yet. And I think it works well enough that if I do close the book on that series, Emergence has a pretty good final note to end on.
What do you think it is about these types of books that resonate with readers? We talked about this is really a golden age for self-publishing, but it's also a golden age for science fiction and especially futuristic science fiction and dystopian and that sort of thing. What do you think it is about these stories that are really finding a an audience and a resonance with people these days?
That's a good question. I don't know that I have a good answer. Um, what resonates? I think it's something that they can't get in great quantity from traditional publishing. I think a lot of the big five, or are they now big four, publishing houses are busy chasing trends.
Right.
If you're looking at dystopian stuff, you get a lot of zombie stuff. When you're self-publishing, you're not necessarily chasing after that trend, and you can kind of write from the heart. You can write what you want to write. So you have a little bit more room to maneuver and be a little bit more, well, maybe a little bit more creative depending on what your ideas are. You can be a little bit more off the wall, a little bit more unexpected. You don't have to follow any particular template to get your work out there and read. Um, when the Lee Child books are successful for what they are in the mystery thriller genre, and you kind of know what you're getting with each one. You can kind of measure out the beats of the book based off the previous one that you read, where, well, Jack Reacher is going to be walking down the street and bump into somebody who needs help, and you kind of know where it's going to go from there. With the self-publishing market, there's a bit more room for creativity to do your own thing and write to your own style. without having to worry about whatever the marketing gurus are drumming up for you. And I think that's something that readers can appreciate. They like to be lobbed a curveball now and then.
Yeah, I think so too, and I think there's something about this about self-publishing that allows the author to get um, feedback from readers really quickly, and a diverse amount of feedback. Where I think that if you are with a traditional publisher, you're typically going to work with one editor or maybe just a couple, and you're going to get very narrow feedback. Whereas with self-publishing, you get reviews, you can have beta readers, you can have ARC readers, and communities on Facebook and different websites and things like that that really allow for this two-way interaction with the audience that is new for artists, and it's a really great time.
Oh, completely. When I did Convergence, when it started off, it was just me. No one else had read it. My wife didn't even know I had submitted it to the Breakthrough Novel Award until I made it through the first round, and I was like, "Hey, guess what, honey?" It's like, "Oh,
you,
I didn't even know you were writing a book." And then it just kind of picked up steam from there, and she read it, and she was solidly in my corner, and she's got that judgment that I can certainly trust. If it had sucked, she would have been very open in telling me that.
right.
And she
I
was,
have one of those wives as well.
oh yeah, they're great. I mean, if you know you're on the wrong track, they let you know immediately. Um, so once it got her seal approval, and we sat down and talked about what I wanted to do and how we could do it. That's when I went to Red Adept and got a quote from them and figured out what I could do, and it went through development edit and line edit. Stephanie Spangler Buswell was my editor over there, and I think she saved my ass more than I'll ever know. She was just an absolutely fantastic editor, and one of those editors that I'm going to take every project that I can to her because I know it's in good hands. And that's something with traditional publishing that you can't be guaranteed, especially as a new writer coming in on the ground floor. They're not going to spend all of that time and resources on me.
Right.
They've got Stephen King to promote. What do they give a shit about? Sorry, I don't know
Right.
if how clean.
That's You're fine. You're fine. I interviewed a traditionally published author a month or two back, and I won't name him. Folks can go to the archives and figure out
Sure.
who it is. But he had a horrible experience with and this is a major publisher for sci-fi and fantasy. Fantasy and sci-fi readers will know which publisher it is.
Mm-hmm.
And he published his first book, and he and his editor did not get along, and the book went through a lot of changes that he didn't like, and it got a very lukewarm response with buyers.
Mm.
And it was a really bad experience for him. And then he had a sequel uh, to publish for it, and it wound up going like 6 or 7 years before publishing the sequel, and he finally was able to make some more edits to the original book and put it back out, but as a kind of director's cut, and it was a really bad experience for him. And I think people assume, well, I'll get a contract with a major publisher and everything's going to be rosy,
Right.
and that was not his experience. And for you to be able to shop around and find the editor that really connects with you and that you have a rapport with and you understand each other, and that's just something that you're not going to get if you sign away everything to someone else. That's a great story that you told about how this process really works.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the control aspect is one of the greatest things to come out of indie publishing for authors like us. And we know what we want. We know the story we want to tell. We can hire out the talent to help us get it as close to perfect as we can. And when we fail, readers let us know.
Well, yeah, Yeah.
And
What?
that's great. That's terrific feedback because it helps us make each successive work better than the previous one. And being able to work one on one with a group of editors and proofreaders was a hugely educational experience. Writing Emergence was a heck of a lot easier than writing the first book, simply because I had that kind of editing background and I was able to go through it with what I had learned from the process for Convergence and be able to have a smoother writing time with it for redrafting. It's phenomenal.
That's really cool. Um, when when you put Emergence out, uh, did you have some audience built from the first book that kind of ran with it, and did you have a an easier time launching the second book?
Yes, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah, it took a while for Convergence to build up any kind of steam. But once Emergence released, in the first week of its release, it outsold Convergence entire first year.
Nice.
Yeah, it was fantastic. In that year between releases, I was able to learn up quite a bit more about marketing and how to get my work out there and what sort of promotions to run, what newsletters to go through. Um, and if I have any advice to say to new writers that are going to be releasing their first work, do not waste your time setting up a newsletter. Do that. What I mean by that is do that immediately. Don't let that slip by for months and months and months like I did, because I think I probably lost a lot of audience reach by waiting. I wasn't
Yeah.
sure what kind of an impact a newsletter would have, and I really regret that it wasn't at the top of my list then.
And what kind of strategy do you use to get people on your mailing list? And hands down, that has been the number one marketing tip from just about everyone I've interviewed is make sure you have a mailing list. Um, but I think there's this kind of elusive thing for some new writers. Okay, I'm supposed to have a mailing list. Now, what do I do with it?
Oh,
How do I get people over there? And then when I do, what the heck do I do with it? How do how does that turn into audience engagement?
sure, it's completely elusive. It's, for me, still quite a bit elusive.
Yeah.
I'm certainly not pulling Mark Dawson numbers on my mailing list. Um, God, I wish I were. What I'm doing right now is if anyone goes to my homepage, michaelpatrickhicks.com, they can sign up for my newsletter and they'll get a free copy of Convergence straight off just for signing up. And then they can decide if they want to keep on with me or not. And I think that's a good way to get readers involved in signing up for your newsletter. You have to make it worth their time. You can't be spammy. I've got a thing at the back of each of my books for a link to the newsletter, and I probably need to make it a little bit more clear how it benefits them. People who sign up for it will be able to get advanced releases of my upcoming work for free. So whenever I get a new book out, they'll be the first people. They get to be on my own little exclusive advanced reader list. And then they can decide if they want to pay $4 for it later. And hopefully they'll leave a review.
And that's been something that I've used in my writing is advanced reader copies and sending out bonuses to the list
Mm-hmm.
every now and then. And one thing that I've noticed is that when you build that relationship with your readers, I don't know exact numbers, but I know that for every free copy that I've sent out to a reader, most of those turn into sales as well. There's this mindset that if we give things away for free, then that's just gone forever, and that's really not the way it works. There's this people respect that you are doing them a solid and will turn around and support you anyway. It's a really crazy thing.
No, I think that's entirely true. There's a good pay it forward kind of mindset to it.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I mean, you're giving them one book, maybe. So what? You give them a
right.
free copy, then maybe you've got a reader for life now who will if they don't buy your work, they'll at least champion it to others. They'll tell somebody that, this is a really good book that I read and you should go buy it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm okay losing the, $1.70 or whatever. That's
Right.
okay. If it's a reader for life, I would welcome that.
That's right. And word of mouth is worth so much more than that $1.70 if they then, pass along a recommendation to a friend or family member.
Oh, for sure.
You also have a story in the anthology No Way Home that our friend of the show Lucas Bale is involved with,
Yes.
and Lucas connected us together. He's a fantastic guy. Tell us about the story that you have in that anthology.
Well, that one has garnered a little bit of controversy since its release.
Oh, that's good.
Well, yeah. It might be one of those mixed bag things.
Yeah.
It's called Revolver. It is a very political piece. I don't think I was quite cognizant of just how political it was when I wrote it. A few reviewers have made me aware that I am perhaps a godless, communist, liberal nutbag, but I'm okay
Okay.
with that. They read it and it ticked them off, and that's okay. That's good.
Yeah. Uh, I think the worst response that you can ever get from a reader is no response.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, there has been definitely some antagonism, but it hasn't been ignored by many of the people that have read it, which is great. It's also generated quite a lot of acclaim. A number of readers reviewed it and reached out and said that that was the best story that they read in the whole collection. It was one of their favorites, and that is a pretty awesome feeling. Given the
Uh,
topic of it, it's about this dystopian future, of course. It would have to be dystopian.
Right, right.
Um, where basically the very far right have assumed a sort of dictatorial stance over the nation, and they invite poor people on to kill themselves in order to raise money for their families to try and get people out of the breadlines, and mainly just for good ratings, because who doesn't want to see poor people kill themselves on live television? So
Wow.
it's touched a few raw nerves.
I'll bet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, fair warning. I mean, I would say that if you're the type who thinks that Donald Trump is the best statesman we could have, Revolver is not your story, and you should probably skip it.
I get it. I get it. That's what was the process like for you, and how first off, how long is the story in No Way Home?
It's probably 30 or 40 pages.
Okay.
It was about a 12,000 word story.
Okay.
Um,
So a long short story.
yeah, it's not short. It's got some meat on it.
Yeah.
More to rile everyone up.
Yeah.
Successively worse with each word.
What's the process like for you in writing a short piece as opposed to a longer piece like Convergence or Emergence? Do you have a difference in your process, or do you just kind of see this for the length it's going to be and just go at it? Is your process any different in those two scenarios?
The process is a little bit different. I know that when I'm doing a short story, I'm writing to a specific word count.
Right.
So the pacing is a little bit different, trying to figure out the scenes that I want to do, and how many words I can allocate to each particular scene and move the story forward to where I want it to go. So, there's it's a little bit more of a conscious approach toward that word count, whereas something like Convergence, I could freewheel it a little bit more, and just kind of let the length be whatever it was going to be. But with the short story, there's definitely a target in mind. I'm not as lost in the weeds with it, trying to figure out how the hell I'm going to make this work. Unless it gets really overly long,
Right.
which thankfully hasn't been much of a problem. Um, I just finished a short story for Sam Peralta. He's got a yet another Future Chronicles anthology brewing that'll hopefully be out in the fall. Um,
Can you say which anthology it's going to be?
it will be in the Cyborg Chronicles,
Okay.
and
All
this is
right.
actually set in the Dreamer world of convergence and emergence. So
Oh,
it's getting back
nice.
to my basic roots, much less controversial. I don't want to put Sam in the firing line. So,
I'm
no.
sure Sam appreciates that.
Oh, I'm sure he better because this could have been bad.
Oh, Michael, are you an outliner or are you
A
a
pantser.
pantser, as as the terminology goes? Do you meticulously plan out your books or do you fly by the seat of your pants?
I am half pants.
Gotcha.
Normally, I have a beginning and an end in mind. If I'm really lucky, I know the middle. Now, what happens in between those sections, I'm a little bit more vague on, but at least by having those three benchmarks, I can write toward it. So it's a very loose outline, and it allows me to do what I need to do and yet allow the story to also shape itself. Once these characters start speaking and telling me what they are going to do, whether I like it or not, I can have a little bit more of a guiding hand. But yeah, it's typically seat of the pants kind of stuff.
Yeah. Do you uh, do you find yourself? This is one thing that when you talk to people who are strict outliners, they usually will say, and you can't speak for everyone, but they usually will say, "Well, I outline because if I don't, I'll spend a lot of time just staring at the screen because I don't know what to do." Uh, do you have those problems by pantsing, or does some pantsers say, well, that's never happened to me. I just I just sit down and I just write the next scene. And do you struggle with writer's block at all in those situations?
I have been fairly lucky so far. Um, I haven't run into a lot of great complications. Now, with Convergence, if I can go back to that, there is a lot of twists and turns building up into the finale. And that one I did have to outline kind of the last three, well, probably the last quarter of the book and try to keep track of everyone's motivations and who's going to double cross who.
Right.
So that was a little bit more in depth of a thought process. I had the ending in mind. It ended up being completely different from what I had in mind, um, but not terribly so. So there was just a little bit of outlining there. With Emergence, that one, the whole story kind of came to me in one go, and I just had to sit down and write it. So that one, there wasn't a whole lot of variation. That ended and began and exactly as I thought it was going to. There weren't a lot of surprises in writing that one. There was a good amount of energy, but not a lot of surprises. With Revolver, I don't know. That one, there was no outlining in that one. That one was maybe just more stream of conscious kind of stuff. I did a short story, Consumption, which is a horror piece that's another long short story that came to me in one fell swoop. So, yeah, I haven't run into a lot of problems. I haven't had much in the way of writer's block. I've kind of have been on a path of knowing what I want to write and when it's time to write it.
Uh, that's awesome. And I think I'm kind of in a similar space. I may take several days or week or so off of writing while I kind of work on the story in my head,
Mm-hmm.
so that when I sit back down at the keyboard, it just flows out. What is your process like? Your writing process? Are you one of these people that tries to get a certain word count every day, or do you kind of work on projects sporadically? Do you have a streamlined process that you go by?
um, to a degree, it's streamlined. The last couple months have been kind of haywire. Just a lot of personal stuff going on and projects that I've been contracted for. When I'm working on a project and I'm able to focus on just one solitary project, I try to get at least 1,000 words a day. and I'm usually able to go above and beyond that. I started writing a news story not too long ago and had to stop that in order to write a short story for Sam. And then another short story came up. We're doing a second anthology with Lucas Bale and all of the authors from No Way Home. So we're all
Nice.
coming back again. That'll be out in August. Um, Hopefully, reviewers will be a little kinder. uh, I've got
Well, it all depends on if you decide to piss them all off or not again.
Yeah, it wasn't deliberately set forth. I kind of got my politicizing out of the way. I can't guarantee that I'll keep quiet once 2016 rolls around, but
Well, sometimes you got to itch and you just got to scratch it.
yeah, and I think I've scratched that itch. So if anyone's
Uh,
afraid, they don't have to be afraid. I'm a teddy bear getting back into that mode of just good guts and blood. Um, so we'll have another short story out anthology in August. I think Sam's will be out in October or November. There was another short story that I was contracted to write, but that anthology actually got canceled, so I'll probably be looking at a solo release for that. Um,
cool.
so for a few months, good 2 or 3 months there, I wasn't able to focus on my current work in progress at all. But now I'm getting back into the swing of things with that one and just playing it by ear for the most part.
Nice. You mentioned your short story consumption a
Yes.
little while ago. Your other books are more science fiction, but some science fiction kind of naturally lends itself to horror. There's a lot of science fiction movies that go horribly wrong.
Oh yeah.
Do you see a line between science fiction and horror, or uh, is there a different mindset when writing a piece that's strictly horror or science fiction for you?
To a degree. Um, yeah, I mean, some of the science fiction, I kind of look at what can go wrong. What are some of the built-in horrors to it? And it's a little less about monsters and gruesomeness. Whereas when I write horror, I am going more for character development and shocking proceedings. I kind of want to get those toes curling and blood tingling that I don't when I'm
Right.
doing science fiction. Um,
Right.
and my sci-fi has been a little bit more action-oriented. Emergence, in particular, I kind of see that one as a big summer blockbuster. So if anyone's looking for a beach read, with consumption, it was more of just trying to be a little bit of a gross, disgusting read. Trying to be a little bit more visceral and go for the jugular on it, and not hold anything back, not pull any punches. And with sci-fi, I think it's just a little bit more. I don't want to say timid. Um,
A more broader audience
yeah, I
appeal.
think that's probably a good way of describing it. Consumption is very for a very particular reader, um, and I think the two Dreamer novels that I did have a little bit more of a broad base to it, and there's a lot of cross genre elements in it, which kind of makes it hard to market because it's sci-fi, but it's also a mystery and a thriller, and Convergence has some noir elements to it. Emergence is sci-fi, but it's also a very huge action piece. There's a lot of big action elements to it, a lot of big set pieces. There's chases and gunfire and all kinds of good stuff.
Awesome. Have you ever written something and then step away from the keyboard and say, "Oh my God, where did that come from?"
Consumption throughout its entirety. Yeah, that was 3 day writing sprint in a complete fever of crazy. I
Yeah, I,
finished that when I was like, Jesus, do I even try to show this to the wife? And
right, right.
went out there and she's like, oh, my dad read it. I'm like, oh boy, this is going to be some uncomfortable family meetings from here on out. We've got a
Thanksgiving's
3 year old
really
niece.
interesting this year.
I'm sorry?
I said Thanksgiving's going to be really interesting this year.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. And we've got a 3-year-old niece now. When it came out, like, geez, are they ever going to let me near the baby again? Am I like banned from?
Oh, I had an experience like that where I'm not much of a horror guy at all, but I was writing this one book and I wound up with a ritual sacrifice scene,
Nice.
and I was I had to just kind of walk away from it for a little bit, like where in the world did that come from? You know, you start questioning, the depths of your heart and
Oh yeah.
stuff. It's pretty funny, but um, Michael, what's coming up next for you?
What's next? The Crime and Punishment anthology with Lucas Bale. Like I said, that should be out in August. There's the Cyborg Chronicles in the fall. Hopefully, I'll be able to get a couple of those short stories released solo next year. So there should be a standalone release for Revolver. Hopefully, a standalone for the story that I did for the Crime and Punishment anthology is called The Marquis. And it's a cowboys versus aliens slash horror spectacle that I'm hoping to
Nice.
commission some interior artwork for before that goes on release. I think that could be a really cool package if I can get some individual art pieces to go in there. Um, and then I've got a work in progress that's also kind of sticking to the horror genre to a degree, and I'm hoping to have that one out sometime next year. My writing
Awesome.
process has slowed down quite a bit. We've got a baby on the way.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So my life has been upended and will not be set straight for many, many years.
Well, I have 5 children, so I can assure you that things will be turned on its head
Oh yeah.
for sure.
So now
Uh,
it's just about when can I write and for how long, and probably, this has been a really productive year as far as turning out projects and forthcoming projects. There's still a few things down the pike, and I think next year I'll probably be slowing it down quite a bit.
Sounds great. You talked about some artwork a minute ago, and I meant to mention earlier that your covers for Convergence and Emergence are just stunning.
Oh, they're
Uh, yeah, would you mind sharing who your cover artist was?
happily. Glendon Haddix over at Streetlight Graphics did the art for both books, and
They're
I
really, really
love what he
great.
did. They're fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Michael, tell everyone where they can connect with you. And you mentioned earlier that if they sign up for your newsletter, they'll get a free copy of Convergence.
hmm
Tell people where to find you and how to connect with you.
Well, if you go to my website, Michael Patrick Hicks, HICKS.com, that's my main portal. It's where I blog. I do some book reviews there. And there's a little banner at the top. They can find links to Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram probably is on there. Wherever they want to look me up, they can find me, which I guess is probably good and bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, if anyone is friendly and wants to find me, they can go to those sites. Um,
Excellent. I also noticed that your books are enrolled in Kindle Unlimited.
yes.
So if people subscribe to Kindle Unlimited, there's been a little hoopla here lately about the way they changed the way they pay authors. Do you have any comment on that? Have you gotten to look at the new stats in KDP, and have you been able to form an opinion about that?
Um, a
Uh,
loose positive opinion right now. I think
Yeah,
it's too early to scream about the sky is falling.
right,
I haven't seen any evidence of that yet, but I guess it'll all depend when we get our royalty statements next month.
right, right.
Um,
Uh,
Go on.
no, no, I was just going to say one thing that I have loved this month is being able to see the number of pages
Yes.
that people read, and uh, I was actually quite shocked after that first couple of days.
Yeah.
I was like, it was really, I was stunned, that and you can look and see exactly which books people are connecting with, and when you see several hundred to several thousand pages a day, that people are actively reading, man, that is a huge boost to the morale of a writer.
Oh, it's fantastic. I really, really, really like.
Yeah,
I was like, I knew people were borrowing the books, and I thought, okay, well, cool. At least they're borrowing it. But I never
right,
knew if they were reading it. Like, how far did they get before thinking this is crap?
exactly.
Now I can
Ex-
log on there and I see that they're reading hundreds and hundreds of pages a day, and I'm like, wow, okay, so people are sticking with it. I guess they're liking it. I sincerely hope that they are. But it's a very cool tool to be able to see that there is, in fact, readership out there who are actively engaged in the story, and we
yeah,
can kind of keep track along with them.
yeah, that's a super cool thing, I think. And uh, if that turns into the positive compensation that we all hope it will, um, I think it'll be a win-win for writers and readers both.
Oh, for sure.
I think at this point, I'm like you. I think we should be cautiously optimistic, and if nothing else, the data that we're getting sure is helpful to know that you're going in the right direction.
Yeah, if it's as financially rewarding as it is emotionally, I think we'll be in
Exactly.
for a good turn.
Exactly. Exactly. Michael, thank you so much for taking time from your Sunday afternoon to come on the show. I really appreciate it, and I'm going to post links to in the show notes to where everybody can connect with you and to go get a free copy of Convergence, and then hopefully turn around and buy the rest of your work.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Hank. It was good talking to you.